YNR spoilers. Monday, March 10th reveal the final search intention. Sharon and Phyllis in mortal peril. A seemingly normal morning in Genoa City turns into a nightmare for Phyllis Summers. Poisoned in a vicious plot, she not only has to fight death but also face a pain that even the strongest of men fear. Luckily, her trusted friend Sharon Newman refuses to give up. With each passing moment, Phyllis grows weaker, and Sharon knows that if she doesn't find an antidote, she will lose her forever. The room they are imprisoned in is dark, the old walls seeming to swallow all hope. Phyllis lies there, rolling around in pain, unable to save herself. Sharon, not giving up, tries every way to free them both. But all her efforts are in vain. The search for an antidote seemed hopeless as the cold iron doors and stuffy space showed no signs of salvation. In those tense moments, Sharon thought about life, about the moments when they had overcome the storms together. But everything was now just a giant puzzle without an answer. Sharon was worried but also frustrated when she realized that Phyllis, the person she had always trusted, could be part of the problem. When she found a new clue, Phyllis was silent and refused to share anything. A small argument took place between the two close friends, revealing the extreme tension. "We need to do something, Phyllis," Sharon gasped, her voice filled with worry. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you find out anything?" Phyllis just shook her head and smiled faintly. "Only forgiveness matters, Sharon. And that's something I can never do for you. No matter what you do, you're still my enemy." Sharon stiffened. "Don't be like that, Phyllis. We don't have time to argue. We have to save your life." Phyllis continued to remain silent, but then, after a long while, she admitted that she had understood something important. "Forgiveness, Sharon, is something no one can take away. It costs nothing. But I cannot forgive you." Sharon heard this, her heart heavy. But she understood that, in this situation, any reason for her and Phyllis to continue living had to come first. They both still had hope. But once Phyllis firmly refused to forgive, nothing would change. Part 2, the battle with pain. Under the threat of death, Phyllis gradually became weaker. She began to feel the pain in her stomach getting worse. She tried to exercise to stay healthy, but the pain made it difficult for her to concentrate. She drank a bottle of water, hoping to quench her thirst, but it was all in vain. The feeling of nausea overwhelmed her, her body was tired and exhausted. "Sharon. I feel like my stomach is on fire," Phyllis said weakly, her voice breaking into pieces. "I can't take it anymore." Sharon saw the despair in Phyllis's eyes. She ran to Phyllis, worried and in pain for her friend. "You have to live, Phyllis. You can't give up now. I will find a way to help you." But Sharon could do nothing more than pray and hope. She recalled every moment she shared with Phyllis, and felt an indescribable pain rising in her heart. She couldn't bear to lose Phyllis. She had to save her. As Phyllis continued to complain about how bad she felt, Sharon seemed to have lost her patience. "Do you hear me, Phyllis? We need the antidote immediately. There's no time to waste." But as Sharon's sigh echoed, a voice came from afar. The voice was distorted, cold, like a warning. The voice was full of innuendo. Sharon cautiously turned around, her eyes shining. This was the only hope they had. She took the last chance and began searching for a solution, while Phyllis lay there, almost losing all hope. Now, Sharon knew she couldn't let Phyllis die. Every second was precious, and the search for the antidote became more urgent than ever. She began to search every corner of the prison cell. Every step, every decision Sharon made carried a great responsibility. Phyllis was still lying there, her body weak but her mind constantly thinking about the past stories. Will Sharon find the antidote in time to save Phyllis's life? Or will this be the last time they can say goodbye? Their story is not over yet, and in any moment, everything can change. Sharon has no choice but to hope for life, for the friendship they have built over the years. That friendship, even in the most dire of circumstances, will still be the only source of strength that can save Phyllis's life. The Last Search, Sharon Newman and Phyllis Summers in Crisis. The strong and resilient Phyllis suddenly finds herself in a life-threatening situation. Phyllis is poisoned in a vicious plot that she cannot escape from, and her best friend Sharon Newman notices the danger. When all hope seems lost, Sharon is determined to find the antidote in a life-or-death battle to save Phyllis, even though they are trapped in a dark room with no way out. Sharon's search is not only a fight against time, but also a tense journey to save the life of her dearest friend. The atmosphere in the small, dark room is almost suffocating. The space is gloomy, with only Sharon's gasping breaths and Phyllis's weak sobs. Phyllis, who was once a symbol of strength and determination, is now lying on the floor, her body weak from the effects of the poison that is invading her body. Every breath she took was labored, each wave of pain seemed to tear her body apart. Sharon, filled with fear, could not bear the sight. She was reeling in despair, not knowing what to do to save Phyllis. Every moment that passed was a cruel trial for Sharon, for she knew that if she did not act immediately, Phyllis would not survive. However, no matter how Sharon searched every corner of the room, there was no sign of relief. All efforts were in vain. Time passed, and hope seemed to be fading. In her despair, Sharon could not contain her frustration and anxiety. She turned to Phyllis, trying to convince her to share any information that could help them escape this situation. "Phyllis, you have to tell me. Have you found anything? Is there anything we can do to save her life?" Sharon screamed, her voice bewildered but determined. Phyllis raised her head, her face pale but her eyes still cold. She just shook her head and smiled faintly. "Nothing, Sharon. You can't save me, like all those times before." Sharon felt like her heart was being torn apart. She didn't want to believe that they could fail. "Don't do this. We can do it, Phyllis. Don't give up." After a long silence, Phyllis finally admitted something she had been hiding for a long time. "Forgiveness, Sharon, that's the most important thing. It's something that can't be bought, nor can it be taken away. But I can't do that. I can't forgive you." Sharon felt choked up. She wanted to say something, but couldn't. Phyllis had always been difficult and stubborn, but this wasn't the time to drag on pointless arguments. "So you're going to die here? You're going to make me responsible for your death?" Sharon couldn't help but scream, anger and grief making her scream. "I need you alive. You're my friend, Phyllis." The two of them screamed in vain, but there was no answer. The room was still quiet, as silent as their fate at the moment. Phyllis seemed to have no more strength to argue, and started doing light exercises to keep her body moving, even though she felt weaker and weaker. After a while, she drank a bottle of water, hoping to quench her thirst. But even so, the pain and fatigue did not subside. She felt nauseous, her body was limp, as if it was burning from the inside. The nausea became more and more severe. Phyllis could not stand, curled up on the old sofa, her hands holding her stomach. "Sharon. I feel like my stomach is on fire," she said softly, her eyes vacant. "I can't take it anymore." Sharon anxiously moved to her side, wanting to comfort her but not knowing what to say. She felt helpless in the face of Phyllis's situation. "We'll get out, Phyllis, I won't give up," Sharon whispered. As Sharon despaired, a distorted voice rang out from somewhere in the darkness. "Sharon, if you want to save her, start looking for an antidote." The voice was like a glimmer of hope. Sharon heard clearly that this was her only chance to save Phyllis. She began to rummage through everything in the room, looking for any sign of an antidote. But there was nothing. Everything was just useless items. The kidnapper, seemingly sensing that Phyllis was about to die, spoke coldly again. "She's probably dying. If she doesn't cooperate, I'll carry out my threat." Sharon didn't give up, she recalled the clues she had found. "It's the beginning and the end. Even if we can't see it, it can still help us," Sharon suggested, trying to get the kidnapper to continue giving information. Finally, Sharon realized something important. Water. Clear water could be the answer to everything. It was clear water, seemingly harmless, that had poisoned Phyllis. And it was water that could finally save Phyllis. In a corner of the room, Sharon saw a labeled bottle of water. She went closer, looked closely, and saw that it was exactly what she had been looking for. "Phyllis, here it is. This is what you need. Drink it, quickly." Sharon cried out, hoping that the light of salvation had finally come. Phyllis, although very weak, still tried to sit up and took the bottle of water. Sharon looked at her with hopeful eyes, praying that this water would work, saving her friend from imminent danger. With the first drops of water, Phyllis seemed to feel a little hope. Sharon kept praying. Both of them waited for a miracle, while they continued to search for a way out, hoping that this journey would end in the light of life. As each day passed, and Sharon Newman and Phyllis Summers were still missing, making the people around them more and more worried and uneasy. Nick Newman and Billy Abbott, although close friends, now only knew how to encourage each other, searching together, but all efforts had not yet brought any results. Clues about Sharon and Phyllis's hiding place seemed to be absent, and despair gradually rose. At Billy's house, Nick stopped by, and the two began a tense conversation, intertwined with anxiety, doubt and helplessness. Next, it will be revealed that the atmosphere in Billy Abbott's house was gloomy when Nick entered. There was no laughter, no cheerful conversations like before. Everything now revolved around the disappearance of Phyllis and Sharon. Nick looked tired, his face tense as he entered Billy's living room. "Billy," Nick began, his voice low, "nothing new. We haven't found any clues about Sharon and Phyllis." Billy looked up from the sofa, a flicker of worry in his eyes. He had always known Nick to be patient and determined, but it was clear that all his efforts were in vain. He shook his head, trying to calm himself. "What about Ian Ward? You're sure he's dead, right?" Nick didn't hesitate, he'd been prepared for this question. "Definitely. I called the morgue and confirmed with them. Ian was cremated." "No doubt about it." The information sent a wave of anxiety through Billy. He stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out as if searching for some answer from the outside world. "But if Ian is really dead, who's behind this kidnapping? Another madman?" Nick was silent for a long moment. He couldn't deny that Billy had a point, but the situation was still unclear. "We can't be sure. But I don't think anyone else is behind this. We just haven't found any signs yet." Billy was fidgeting, his heart filled with worry. He knew that if Phyllis and Sharon were still alive, they wouldn't have kept quiet for so long. Some bad plan, or some unknown villain, was definitely after them. And all they were doing was going around in circles in a maze with no way out. A sense of dread was beginning to take over, but Billy tried to find a way to lighten the mood. "Look, Nick, you've done your best. Don't let this destroy you. Come on, take a break. Stop the search, let's have a beer." Nick looked at Billy with a tired but approving expression. He knew that in this situation, sometimes a pause and a break were necessary to keep from losing himself. "Not a normal bonding activity, but I think we might need it." Billy smiled slightly, a small relief on his face. "Sure. Even though none of us want to bond in this situation, at least there's something to help us feel less stressed. Sitting back and talking with friends might make things a little more bearable." As they sat down in the pub, the atmosphere lightened a little. Nick sipped his beer quietly, his mind still racing to find Sharon and Phyllis. But even as he tried to put it aside, thoughts of the hardships he'd gone through during the search wouldn't leave him. Billy looked at Nick, his eyes full of sympathy. Even though they didn't always agree on everything, the empathy between them was strong. "I know how it feels. Like you're chasing a dark shadow. There's nothing we can do but keep looking." They were silent for a long moment, as if time had stopped for that moment. The conversation between the two was no longer about strategies or hypotheses, but about the recognition that not everything could be solved immediately. And sometimes, even the strongest people need time to accept helplessness. Doubts and unsolved secrets. As the conversation turned to old stories, memories of times they faced challenges together, both friends realized that they had never faced a situation as dire as this. Billy remembered their early days as fighters against common enemies, but this time, there was a different feeling. Do we really know who's behind this? Billy asked, his voice filled with doubt. Maybe Ian is just a pawn in someone else's game. Are we missing something important? Nick sat up straight, thinking about Billy's question. He nodded, and a vague sense of unease rose within him. They hadn't found any evidence yet, but that only made things more uncertain. A person could do anything when left unchecked, and when the family was pushed to the limit of their patience, they could do unpredictable things. But one thing was certain, Nick and Billy weren't giving up. The search wasn't just a mission, it was a promise. A promise they'd sworn to keep, no matter the odds, no matter the dangers they faced. Nick and Billy's search continued, nothing was clear, but they knew they couldn't stop. The beer chats were just temporary breaks, but deep down, they knew the threat was still there. They will not stop searching, not only for Sharon and Phyllis's survival, but for their friendship, for the justice they cannot afford to lose. And no matter how hard it gets, they know they will keep fighting, until they find the truth. Subscribe to YNR for the latest news on our channel.